G'day folks, welcome to the first report. We're just at the end of 10:40 a.m. turn, so it's just on 11 a.m. Battle's been going for about 2 hours. So let's review what's happened. So the first hour was pretty quiet, with just the Allies just slowly advancing towards those French lines. Now I mentioned in the setup video that the Allies don't want to push through this woods. They've just been, you've got here Ingoldsby's brigade or detachment, just guarding this area off here. There's a lot of Allied cavalry. This is I think the Austrian cavalry behind the lines here. So these skirmishers certainly don't want to push out too far. And in fact, they haven't moved at all. They're happy just to hold the woods, threaten that Allied flank, keep quite a few of these Allied units occupied, as the bulk of this Allied infantry drives. Now, Cumberland hasn't yet launched his Infernal Column. This is something he can do. It really places the focus of his command efforts then in this area. We haven't done that yet. And I'll explain my thinking of that in just a moment. First of all, Allied artillery around here, including these Dutch forces, tried to bombard this area with very little effect. Conversely, French artillery throughout the line was doing a lot of damage to these units out in clear terrain. And in that first hour, French not only drew first blood, but they inflicted quite a few hundred casualties among these Allied forces. The main, or the first really close combat assault took place in here, when some of these English foot units assaulted that French line. And despite the French really dominating fire combat for that first hour and a half, the English had some really remarkable success in their close combat. They attacked, I think, with 4 regiments at once. One regiment was shaken out on the right. This is not the situation, but one was shaken. They failed their attack morale check. And the other 3 had some pretty good success. They punched some holes in that French line. And while the French had spent basically an hour getting their cavalry behind the line, you can see over here some cavalry here, cavalry here. They've moved this front line and second line cavalry up to prepare to effectively opportunity charge any Allies that broke through the line. Unfortunately, I'd left a little gap in my coverage around this area, and there were no cavalry in this particular area to countercharge at that moment, which enabled the Allies to hold that ground and then move more forces into the area. So we've got about 3 English brigades pushing into this gap, which is now 4 hexes wide. It goes from the outskirts of those Fontenoy defences, those fieldworks, out to the right here. And I think the only reason the English haven't pushed any further to right is because of this, they're scared of this large redoubt in this position here. So they've had a lot of success. This is the English foot units with pretty good combat values, CV values of 4 or 5, against these French who tend to have values of 3 or 4. That's one factor. Using their leaders, of course, wisely in close combat. But even then, so just in the last 20 minutes, the last 40 minutes really, the cavalry has been brought up, French cavalry has been brought up to counterattack. And the British have been very lucky in their close combat. This unit here in particular was charged by some of these cavalry. I think it's probably this one here, if that is a cavalry. They were disordered at the time, and they stood their ground and rolled well in close combat, such that they had a second round of combat against this cavalry and ended up routing the cavalry. So disordered infantry stands up to fresh French cavalry. In another cavalry charge around here, against, I think, this unit in square, the square, from memory, let me just check my lost charts. The square, I think they eliminated that French cavalry. Yeah, this is I'll show you the French lost charts that I've got here, if you can see that. This was the French cavalry regiment that was, squadron, sorry. I think it's a squadron. That was eliminated. by, well, the English infantry formed square as they charged. They had the opportunity to do so. They passed the morale check, and it was a very strong square that really did a lot of damage to that cavalry. And out on the right, some more cavalry charges were just stood up. There was only, in fact, I think there's two. There was one infantry unit that routed here when charged, and another here that routed. So there are some routed units behind the lines. But as you can see behind the French lines, they've done a lot of damage themselves, and they've routed. Well, at the present, there are 4 French units. In fact, I haven't done the... I haven't conducted the rally phase for this 1040 AM turn yet, so some of those units may well rally. I think the advance went pretty well. I left some good gaps for these routed units to pass through. There were some roadblocks, so some of these units have routed a second time, and the same thing has happened to the French. They're trying to route through these retreat paths, and they're running over their own routed units, which is sending them routing a second time. So thus far, the English assault in this area going pretty well, and you can see a lot of forces now being funneled into the area just to the north of those Fontenoy fieldworks. Don't want to have to confront them because the Dutch forces around here thought they would have a go, or I thought the Dutch forces would have a go and see if they could assault these fieldworks. And to give you a visual demonstration of how that went, these are the losses for those regiments that tried to do so. 1 was eliminated due to losses, 1 surrendered during their assault, and 2 others in the area being hammered by those French 8-pounders along the wall. So as you can see now, the Dutch moving out to the left. There are still a few of these battered units with their 3-pounders. They have to move them right to the fieldworks to have any success. So they're still trying to do that, but they're moving around to the left. Out in the far left, near Antoine, the Dutch were heading towards these are the major fieldworks until this happened. And then these guys diverted around just to the right a bit. So they've actually just launched their first assaults against the French. Here you can see this disordered French unit here, and the shaken Dutch, I think, and the routed Dutch behind the line. It didn't go very well. And so this is where they're now striking. It would be nice if they were a bit further up to support, but I guess they're keen to get involved. From the French point of view, as I said, the front lines have remained where they were, no changes there. Artillery doing a lot of damage, but that's all initial setup. A lot of chances for opportunity fire as these guys advance. And I've just been trying to move the cavalry into positions where they can opportunity to charge if those allied forces break through. All of these forces, if I just move this around, all the French forces from Ramaquois and Mathew are now very slowly moving. There are no allies pushing through the woods, so they figure that area is safe. These French cavalry here are not moving. They're pretty happy with the situation where they are. They're just sort of our reserve cavalry. I may start to move them up over the next hour or so, depending on how things go. What else has happened? That's about it, really. Just gradually moving these allied forces. I mean, I'm not trying to throw everything in against the French at once. I'm trying to keep order, trying to keep brigades together, keep them coherent. Just move the camera around to give you another perspective on battle, stop it falling over as well. Trying to keep these brigades together, trying to keep them coherent. Yes, this has been mainly English infantry at this stage. We do have these are the Hanoverians here. I think I got that wrong earlier in my setup. I thought these guys were Hanoverians. They're in fact English foot. And we do have all the cavalry behind the line. So the Allied cavalry is nowhere near the front lines at the moment. And to be honest, it is difficult to get them up there. The French cavalry is right there, and here routed. They're here, they're right behind the lines. Because the Allies are sending all their infantry in a close, tight bunch, there's no room for that cavalry to manoeuvre. In fact, the most advanced cavalry are these guys here, who were just really... I was worried about a French potential counterattack on these artillery pieces. So I moved some infantry up. They are protected somewhat, and partly covered by Ingoldsby's brigade out here. But I also brought the cavalry up just in case. If the French do come out from their defences, I think the Allies would welcome that as an opportunity to hit them in sort of exposed open ground. So that's the situation at the end of the 10:40 a.m. turn, right on 11 o'clock, at the end of 2 hours of fighting. The plan for the Allies is to continue as usual. The French trying to get more infantry into this little gap here to block it, recover their units, which will hopefully happen over the next 20-40 minutes, and try and push the English back out of this area to contain this breakthrough and squeeze it out of existence. French guns doing a lot of great work. French cavalry, not so much. Stay tuned and I'll report again in a couple of hours of gameplay.